Country music's Nashville has a very specific way of rewarding the people who built it. It makes you famous. It puts your name on marquees across America. It sells your records, your face, your heartbreak, and your story. And then, if the contracts were wrong, the managers were crooked, or the money burned faster than it came in, it moves on to the next name. The industry stays standing. You do not. These 7 artists put tens of millions of records into American homes. They wrote songs that are still playing right now somewhere on a radio station in a city they never performed in. When they died, the money was somewhere else. These are the verdicts. Number 7. Mel Street. Mel Street spent most of his adult life waiting to be discovered. He worked as a radio tower electrician in Ohio. He ran an auto body shop in Bluefield, West Virginia. He played honky-tonk bars where the bar stools outnumbered the crowd. When Borrowed Angel climbed to number 7 on the country charts in 1972, it was as if every one of those rooms had been paying in slowly. Over the next 6 years, he placed 13 songs in the top 20 on Billboard's country chart. His voice was good enough that George Jones, as demanding a judge as country music has ever produced, publicly said so. You do not get that from George Jones without earning it completely. In 1978, Street signed with Mercury Records. He had just turned 45. On the morning of October 21, his birthday, he sat at the breakfast table with his wife, his brother, and his sister-in-law in their Hendersonville home. He excused himself, walked upstairs, and shot himself. His brother found him in the upstairs room with a handgun beside him. There was no note, no explanation. The same morning, a new Mel Street single debuted on the Billboard country chart. The title was Just Hangin' On. 4 more posthumous singles followed. A greatest hits album released in 1981, promoted through late-night television, sold nearly 400,000 copies, according to his manager at the time. Nashville was still building revenue from Mel Street long after the industry had finished making time for him. Number 6. Webb Pierce. No one in country music put more songs at the top of the charts during the 1950s than Webb Pierce. Not Hank Williams. Not Eddie Arnold. Not Lefty Frizzell. Webb Pierce spent 113 weeks at number 1 in a single decade. His recording of In the Jailhouse Now sat at the top spot for 21 consecutive weeks in 1955. For most of that decade, country radio in America was, in large measure, Webb Pierce radio. He charted 48 singles in the decade, and 39 of them reached the top 10. Jim Reeves was selling records in the same era, and even he couldn't touch Pierce's chart dominance in those years. Nashville's response was to spend the following decades declining to formally recognize him. Pierce died of pancreatic cancer in February 1991 at the age of 65. He had never been inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Just months before his death, he had again failed to receive the necessary votes. He was inducted posthumously years after his death, once he was no longer alive to walk into the building. The artist with more number 1 country singles than any other performer of his era, the man who filled the radio gap after Hank Williams died and kept it filled for 20 years, did not receive the industry's highest honor while he was breathing. Nashville benefited from Webb Pierce for 4 decades. It gave him a plaque after he was gone, when the gesture could no longer cost anyone anything. Number 5. Lefty Frizzell. In 1951, Lefty Frizzell became the first artist in the history of country music to have 4 songs simultaneously in the Billboard Top 10. 4 songs. At the same time, it had never happened before. It has never happened since. The honky-tonk vocal style he built in Texas roadhouses became the genetic material of what country singing would sound like for the next 50 years. George Jones cited him. Merle Haggard cited him. Willie Nelson, Randy Travis, and George Strait all said the same thing. Every major country vocal lineage of the second half of the 20th century traces a direct line back to Lefty Frizzell. Early in his career, before he understood what his name was worth, bad management led him to sign away much of his publishing rights. He did not know what those contracts contained. Nobody walked him through them. The songs kept generating royalties. Frizzell kept seeing a smaller share of them. By the time of his death at 47 in 1975, he told a journalist in one of his final interviews that a massive diamond ring with his initials in solid gold was about all he had left from those heady early days. He said he considered himself lucky to still have it, given the trouble it had seen. A ring. The man who built the vocal architecture of country music died at 47 with a piece of jewelry as his primary surviving artifact of what he had built. The songs are still being licensed. They pay someone. They have always paid someone. Number 4. Johnny Paycheck. Before you get to the part of this story everybody knows, there is a detail almost no one leads with. Take This Job and Shove It, the song that sold over 2 million copies after hitting number 1 in 1977 and became the most recognizable working-class anthem of its generation, was not written by Johnny Paycheck. It was written by David Allan Coe. Paycheck delivered the vocal that made it famous. The songwriting royalties went to Coe. The record revenue went to the label. Paycheck received a portion of the performance income and a set of obligations that outlasted every dollar of it. By 1976, the year before the biggest hit of his career, he had already declared bankruptcy once. IRS debts, a paternity suit, and a check forgery conviction had eaten through whatever the music had paid. The hit came. The problems did not leave. Epic Records dropped him in the early 1980s. In 1985, a barroom argument in Hillsboro, Ohio, ended with Paycheck shooting a man in the head. According to documented accounts, he shouted, "I'm no country hick," before firing. He served 2 years at the Chillicothe Correctional Institute from 1989 to 1991. By 1990, he owed the IRS $1.06 million and declared bankruptcy again. The man whose one undeniable cultural monument told America to throw their working life back in their boss's face died in 2003 at 64, having declared bankruptcy twice, served prison time, and spent his final years playing venues that no longer matched the size of what he had once been. The song still plays. The writer's royalties still go somewhere else. Number 3. Dottie West. In 1964, Dottie West became the first woman in history to win a Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. She was in the room writing songs alongside Willie Nelson and Roger Miller before either of them had a name most people recognized. Patsy Cline had blazed a trail for women in country music just years earlier, and West was among the first to carry that forward into the next decade. By the early 1980s, West was pulling in between $1 and $2 million a year in touring income. She bought a colonial mansion in Williamson County, Tennessee with a bowling alley, designer clothes organized by color in custom closets, and a ceiling mirror above the master bed. For a woman who grew up picking cotton in Mississippi with no running water and no indoor toilet, it was a very specific kind of proof that the distance was real. In August 1990, West filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. She owed the IRS over $1.03 million. The bank foreclosed on the mansion. Her car was repossessed. Her close friend and duet partner Kenny Rogers lent her one of his vehicles to drive. The IRS then scheduled a public auction of her remaining personal possessions during the 1991 Country Music Fanfare in Nashville. The industry's biggest annual gathering, held the same week the whole business came to town. West attended the auction. She signed autographs for fans on one side of the room while her belongings went to the highest bidder on the other. She raised her hand to buy some of her own items back. 5 weeks later, at 58, she was killed in a car accident on her way to perform at the Grand Ole Opry at the Ryman Auditorium. The car Rogers had lent her stalled in her driveway. A neighbor offered to drive her. She was killed in that neighbor's car on the way to a show because she no longer owned a vehicle that ran. Nashville put out a tribute within the week. It moved on shortly after. Number 2. Tammy Wynette. 20 number 1 singles. Over 30 million albums sold. The First Lady of Country Music. a title that carried no financial protections of any kind. Tammy Wynette died on April 6, 1998, at 55, with an estate of approximately $900,000. Her ex-husband and former duet partner George Jones died 15 years later with an estimated net worth of $35 million. Wynette had outsold nearly every female artist in the history of the format. The money was not with her at the end. About a year and a half before her death, she sat down with her 4 daughters and wrote out by hand, on yellow legal pads, exactly how she wanted her estate divided. She was specific. She was careful. After her death, her 5th husband and manager, George Ritchie, stated that he could not locate the legal pads. He inherited the bulk of the estate. Her daughter, Georgette Jones, later stated publicly that the 4 daughters received approximately $5,000 each. Ritchie sold the publishing rights to Wynette's music catalog before his own death in 2010. Her daughters have said they did not know the sale was being arranged until it was done. Her 4 daughters filed a $50 million wrongful death lawsuit in 1999. Her body was exhumed from Woodlawn Memorial Park Cemetery in Nashville that April for a second autopsy. The original cause of death was revised. Now here is the complication in this story, because this list would not be honest without one. Several of these artists contributed directly to their own financial ruin. West's spending in the 1980s was documented as reckless by multiple sources at the time. Paycheck drank, used narcotics, and shot a man in a bar. Wynette's personal choices and spending patterns were real factors in where she ended up. These were not purely passive victims of a machine. The machine did not act alone. What Nashville built was something more specific than outright theft. It built a structure centered on Music Row, the publishing houses, the labels, and the performance rights machinery, where when the personal collapse started, there was no floor, no financial safeguard, no one inside the building whose job was to make sure the person generating the revenue kept any of it long term. When the burning began, there was nothing to stand on. The industry collected its share at every stage. The artists were on their own with what was left. Number 1. Hank Williams. Williams had 12 #1 country hits between 1949 and 1953. He placed 55 singles in the Billboard Country Top 10. Elvis Presley, Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, and Ray Charles all recorded his songs. At the peak of his career in 1951 and 1952, he earned over $100,000 a year. He never owned a single song he wrote, not one. When Fred Rose of Acuff-Rose Music signed Williams in 1946, he placed him on the very first exclusive songwriter's contract the publishing firm had ever issued. Every composition Williams created was assigned to Acuff-Rose. The artist performs, the publisher owns. That was the arrangement, standard practice, invisible to a 22-year-old from Alabama who had never had a music lawyer and had no reason to know what a publishing right was worth, or what organizations like BMY existed to protect. His divorce from his first wife, Audrey, stripped away half his performance royalties and the family home on top of that. He spent his final months living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Nashville, recording between medical crises, earning performance income that had been reduced by legal obligation. He died at 29 in the back seat of a Cadillac on New Year's Day, 1953, being driven through West Virginia to a concert in Ohio. A doctor in Knoxville had injected him with morphine and vitamin B12 the night before. The driver stopped for gas in Oak Hill, West Virginia, and realized his passenger had died in the back seat. Rigor mortis had already set in. The personal assets of Hank Williams at the time of his death totaled approximately $10,000. His songs are worth over $100 million today. Sony acquired the acuff-rose catalog in 2002. The firm Fred Rose founded with the stated purpose that no man or girl who entered their door would be cheated out of a song or 1 penny of anything coming to them, became one of the most valuable publishing properties in American music. It was built substantially on songs Hank Williams wrote during a 6-year career while he was alive, in exchange for nothing except the performance income that his divorce cut in half and his medical expenses consumed. He left no will. There was no one watching the contract. Nashville has spent 7 decades telling the story of what Hank Williams meant to country music. It has had considerably less to say about how the arithmetic worked out for him.